with creativity. There are many businesses that had to come to a standstill, unfortunately, in this pandemic. And that is because the need for that business was not felt so strongly. People stopped going out of their house. They were not consuming services and products that they were running after or chasing or prioritizing just some time back. Now, these are the times when our creativity gets challenged, where we need to see how can we bring in creativity in our own space. Even if we still have something to offer to people, can we offer it in a different way, in a way that we've never done before, so that we are not just a good to do or good to have service or product, but a must to do or a must to have service or product. And that is where creativity becomes the key skill to have. But what does creativity really mean? For all these 5 skills, I want us to spend some time on what it means and how we can develop this. Now, what does creativity really mean? I'm sure you would agree it's not about playing with colors. It's not about just the artistic form of creativity. Creativity is also intellectual creativity, where you're trying to bring in different solutions to an existing situation. So in my view, creativity is actually a beautiful amalgamation of thinking out of the box and thinking within the box. Now, when you say thinking out of the box, you are talking about solutions that you have never thought through, ideas that were just probably, in a notebook or on your computer, or probably not even there, but you're now going beyond your comfort zone and thinking on what are the different ways of approaching the existing situation or problem that you're dealing with. And that's what we understand as an out-of-box thinking. But there is also an element of staying within the box. And that is where the differentiation lies, right? The fact that we need to create the balance between thinking out of the box and still staying within the box, within the creative limitations that are always around us. As I always say, even if you are a very creative artist, you can have a blank canvas in front of you to paint whatever you want to paint, but that canvas will also have a defined dimension. It cannot be stretched to a forever dimension that you can paint on, right? So no matter how big you choose your canvas to be, it will have some limitation, and that is the creative limitation within which you need to be creative and think out of the box. So you bring your out of the box solutions within the limitations of your creativity. Now, what does that mean in simple words? In our existing business scenario, we have certain resources, and those resources have in fact shrunk. They've come down. They were far lesser than they were before. And that's because our expenses have to be monitored. There is more control over our spend. There is a sudden reduction in the revenues, right? So we know that cash flow needs to be maintained and managed in a much more careful manner than ever before. So the resources that we were enjoying earlier probably are lesser in number now. Now the question is, are we going to wait for these resources to increase in number and then we can bring in creativity? Or can we play around with what we have within the limitations that we are stuck with, that we are dealing with? Within these limitations and the restricted resources, how can you bring out of the box solutions? That is what creativity truly means. Creativity is not subject to or dependent upon the luxury of resources and the luxury of space and flexibility. Real creativity lies within the limitations. So I urge you to look at your limitations currently and maybe plot it on a piece of paper if you can, and create a box, sort of a space there, to see how within this space can you bring out of the box solutions. And now let me take you into ways of developing creativity. Now, creativity is not developed because it is supposed to be brought into the business scenario or work scenario today. It is not developed when I need to apply some creative solutions. Creativity is developed over a period of time. It is developed through certain practices, and those practices are pretty much ongoing practices. The two that I want to discuss is first, experimenting. By experimenting, I mean going beyond the obvious, going beyond what you know, bringing in members from other teams for your own discussions, creating diverse teams. And diversity not just in terms of gender, diversity in terms of experience, diversity in terms of background, in terms of knowledge, skill set. How diverse can you go with your existing team? And that is what allows different mindsets to play and different ideas to come to the table. So look at your existing team structure and question yourself on how consciously have you created diversity in your teams? And can you create space to allow more diversity? The second experiment that you need to do is to allow failures. And I'm calling this as an experiment because it is one of those things that we love to accept. We love believing that it's a great thing. We should accept failures. It's, there is no problem when my team fails. I'm always with them. But I want you to put your hand on your heart and see how okay are you with failures, your own failures, before you can forgive other people for their failures. Are you considering failures as a way to learn, or are you getting sucked into those failures? Are you taking time to quickly move on and take the next step forward, or are you wasting your time in dwelling into those failures and the root cause analysis and forever getting into the analysis paralysis situation? Allowing failures literally means celebrating mistakes. Celebrating to the extent that it is clearly spelled out that we just went wrong with something. Here are the learnings. Let's give post-its to everybody and stick it on the wall to say, if this happens, then this is where things go wrong, and move on in that moment itself to the next thing to be done. That is how you allow failures in the real sense. The third way of developing creativity is to stop using the word but and replace it with and. Try doing that in your normal conversation and see the difference. In any time you feel like adding the word but, just replace it with and without worrying about being grammatically incorrect, because it will add a lot more value than just grammar. We often bring this word even when we are appreciating people, don't we? So we say that, this is great, but you could have done that better. You are a great listener, but you're not there when I want you. There is always a but to negate something good that you've just said. So when people are bringing in ideas, when you're doing brainstorming sessions, when you're doing open discussions, everything is accepted with a word and not but. We could do this, but we don't have resources. We could consider this, but there is less time. So let's not do this, let's do that. You with me? So the moment you say and, you're just allowing everything to be accepted first. Let's just bring everything on the table. Say, okay, we'll look at this and this and this and this and this, and let's bring it now on the table to create your pool for brainstorming, and then take this process further to arrive at final ideas that are worth implementing in the current scenario within your creative limitations. The fourth thing is to stop micromanaging. When you are inviting a creative process, and there is, by the way, a process behind creativity, when you invite this process, the first thing to do is to accept whatever is being presented to you as ideas. When you try to micromanage, you try to implement things that you already know, and you already know how it needs to be done. So with that clarity, when you dive into somebody else's creative space, you are taking the creativity away and out of the picture completely. So when you are allowing people to be creative, you also have to allow them the space to enjoy that creativity and use their creativity to come up with out-of-the-box solutions. And another way, the fifth way of developing creativity, is to question assumptions that you have in your mind when you are picking up a task. When you look at a situation, what assumptions rule your thought process? Are you able to pinpoint on those assumptions? Are you able to clearly see the assumptions that you're playing from? Think about this question, because your immediate action to this could be a big yes. And that, in my view, is actually a big no if you can really go deeper and create evidence of the fact that you are led by assumptions a lot more than you often realize. So can you write them down on the in terms of the tasks that you have recently dealt with, and what are the assumptions that played on your mind during that particular episode or for that particular task. So this is how you experiment on developing creativity, right? You can build diverse teams, you can allow failures, you need to replace the word but with and so that you bring in all ideas onto the table. You stop micromanaging to give space to people so they could be creative, and you question the assumptions with which you're operating. The second tip that I want to leave you with on creativity is time boxing. Now, time boxing is a conscious slot that you create in the day where you will only use creativity as a way to crack a particular situation or arrive at a certain solution for a particular task. So it's like training your mind to say that, okay, this 1 hour, my next 1 hour from 5 to 6 p.m. or whatever time it is for you is my creative time. I'm going to pick up a particular situation and I will see how I can look at this differently, how I can bring in different perspectives, how I can change my approach towards this particular process. It is a muscle that needs to be developed. Just as how you sharpen every single skill that you currently possess with some practice, you need to also work on your creativity, your creative thinking ability, creative process as a skill that needs to be sharpened with time boxing. So when we started writing, when we learned how to read and write, if you remember, and now if you see your children growing up and going through the same process, you will realize that there is repetition in it. There is a certain practice that goes in it every single day. There is some time boxing that happens, which is our school hours. And even within those school hours, there is time boxing of different lectures, different classes, where your mind is tuned to learning a language, then your mind is tuned to understanding numbers, then your mind is tuned to sharpen your logical ability. The same process needs to be applied even now at our age, where we are at our position in our life. Anytime you bring in a skill to sharpen. And if we are sharpening leadership skills, especially in this pandemic situation, we need to block that 1 hour or 30 minutes every day only to sharpen our creative thinking process, only to look at a task and challenge ourselves to think out of the box by staying within the limitation, the creative limitation that surrounds us, our limited resources.